I see people are joining. Hey, everybody, this is Rich Eng. I serve as the State Coordinator for Take Back Our Republic. On behalf of all of us on the leadership team, want to welcome you to our night tonight to discuss a very, very important initiative called Final Five voting here in Wisconsin. If you can look to the chat window, there is a sign-in sheet. We'd love for you to go ahead and click on that link. Everybody should have access. Go ahead and enter your contact information. We'd love to be able to keep track of who was able to attend this call. And again, with that, we'll go ahead and get started. This meeting is being recorded, just so everybody knows, and we will send this out to everybody who attended and RSVP to the call. Again, welcome everybody. We're here to discuss Final Five voting. My name again is Rich Eng, State Coordinator for Take Back Our Republic. And I am super excited about Final Five voting because not only is Final Five voting a powerful political innovation and has a ton of benefits, which I'll let our speakers dive into, but beyond powerful, it is also passable. It is a bill which has bipartisan support. It is something that is in the relatively achievable time horizon. And those two combinations of being both powerful and passable is what excites me about this bill. Again, for those of you just joining here, if you can go ahead and sign in on the sign-up sheet, that would be wonderful. Listen, tonight we have just a wonderful evening planned for you. Evening will be divided into three parts. Our first part will be just some incredible speakers, followed by a Q&A session. After that, part two will be a chance for all of us to dive deeper and roll up our sleeves by experiencing one of the 7 teams that will be utilizing in order to secure a win for Final Five voting. And then last part of the meeting will be for the new team leaders and deputy team leaders to be able to go and get connected with the rest of us, should that be what you choose to join. So about us, first of all, I wanted to share that even though tonight is about Final Five voting, the group of people who are hosting this call actually care about a few other things as well. We care about many different items relative to fighting corruption. We care about nonpartisan redistricting. We care about money in politics and campaign finance. We care about security and access for voters and elections. And those are the things that we like to drive. But tonight is specifically around Final Five voting. And to drive these initiatives, we utilize 3 different brands. Tonight's call is hosted by Take Back Our Republic, which is the brand that we'll be using specifically to advance Final Five voting here in Wisconsin. We also have another brand called Represent Us, which we use to fight about ending corruption. And then our third brand is called Voters First, which is our fundraising arm. So with that, I would like to remind the people again who have just joined to go ahead and enter your information in the sign-up sheet that is posted in the chat. And we'd love to capture your information and make sure that you receive a very warm welcome. All right, so let's dive into our very first part of the agenda, which is the wonderful trio of speakers that we have for you. So our first speaker tonight is Sara Eskrich. Sara is the Executive Director of Democracy Found, which is the organization that is the brainchild and leading emphasis for Final Five voting. Sara is a Badger at heart, having gone to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She is no stranger to politics, having served on the city council for our state capital. Immediately after Sara, our next great speaker is John Pudner. John is the Executive Director of Take Back Our Republic. He is also has deep roots here in Wisconsin, his wife being from here. John went to Marquette. He never misses a game with the Golden Eagles when he can. And he is probably one of the most savvy strategists I've ever known. He actually orchestrated the stunning victory that Dave Pratt had over House Majority Leader Eric Cantor back in 2014. So just amazing thinker, and I think you'll love hearing from John Pudner. And then our third and final speaker tonight will be Adam Friedman. Adam is the Executive Director of Rank the Vote and is the founder of Voters' Choice Massachusetts, which was the largest state organization advocating for ranked choice voting across the country. Adam has a ton of experience. He is an innovator, a great thinker, a great organizer. He is the creator of the ranked choice voting playbook And we are glad to hear Adam tonight, and I think he'll be able to share with you some great insights as we work our way through the agenda. So with that, one last reminder to go ahead and sign in on the sign-up sheet if you haven't done so. That link is posted in the chat. So we'll go through all three of our speakers, one right after the other. And at the end of the speaker time, we'll be able to take some questions. If you have questions in the interim, please go ahead and enter them into the chat. We have various people monitoring them, and we will try to address what we can in our Q&A time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and put your virtual hands together for Sara Eskrich as our first keynote speaker.
Thank you, Rich. What a lovely welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's really exciting to see so many faces on the screen talking about this really important topic. So as Rich said, my name is Sara Eskrich. I am honored, privileged every day to serve as the Executive Director of Democracy Found in Wisconsin, where we are solely focused on implementing Final Five voting for federal elections in our state. So I'm going to quickly go over what that is and our high level of our strategy of what we're working to accomplish, and then we can get into much more detailed conversation later in the program. So this all goes back to, as you're seeing here on the screen, this underlying politics industry theory that was originated by Wisconsin businesswoman Catherine Gale, who ran a business in Germantown. Many of you are likely familiar with politics industry theory, so I won't go into detail, but I would highly recommend for those of you who are not familiar with this work to take a look at the book that she recently published with Harvard Business School's Michael Porter, or if you are not interested in reading a book during these crazy times, there's a 17-minute TED Talk that I would highly recommend to you that you can get the concepts very, very quickly. Happy to throw that link in the chat later. So to summarize why we're all here, I like to start with this Venn diagram, which is classic Catherine, which is to say, there's a problem in our system when there is no intersection in this Venn diagram of elected officials acting in the public interest and the likelihood that they get reelected. So this is the set of misaligned incentives we are working to overcome with the system of Final Five voting. It is to say, how do we make it so that when you are an elected official serving in Congress in Washington, D.C., you are able to do the things that the vast majority of your constituents want you to do to deliver those results for their constituents back at home in their district. Because right now we've got a couple problems that get in the way of this happening. Really, the first being our party primary structure, which is very quickly summarized by saying essentially 10% of the electorate determines over 80% of the seats in Congress. So we're all pretty familiar with this problem because we care about politics deeply and we understand that there's this bizarre eye of the needle that is the party primary, but many people are not. We don't think about it very often that because of this lack of competition in our elections, we are really ceding a huge amount of power to a very small group of people in special interests, and that influence is not just determinative of who gets elected, but rather, even more importantly, the incentives that those elected officials are operating under when they're in office, setting up this misaligned Venn diagram that we see on the screen. So what does that mean? That means that when they are in DC governing, the operative question when you're looking at any piece of legislation, if you bear with me for the thought experiment, should be, in all common sense, you're looking at a piece of legislation, you might think to yourself, is this good policy? Is this policy that is going to do what it says it's going to do? Or even is this something that the majority of my constituents would want me to support, would want me to vote yes on? But really, the only question that ends up mattering because of the design of our election system is, will I make it back through my party primary if I vote for this? And if the answer to that question is no, then all the other questions that really should matter don't matter, because the incentive is to get reelected. And so you do what needs to be done to do all the other important things that elected officials are doing and trying to do in Congress. So they have to cater to that base that is so important to them getting reelected. Because again, as we all know more than anyone else, because we care about these issues so deeply, primarying isn't just a primary isn't just a noun anymore, it's a verb, right? It's we are going to primary you threat if you don't stay in line with party rank and file on any particular thing. So that's the first problem. And then the second problem is that there's no accountability when our elected officials are in office for delivering results, because there's no credible competition. And again, this is something that we hear about and we kind of understand instinctually when we look at our ballot, but we don't think about very often, which is to say, whenever anyone other than our two major party candidates gets into a race, they become a spoiler, they become a wasted vote. There is this problem that in our politics, for some reason, it's the only industry where we're regularly told that more competition, more credible choices is bad for us as customers. So it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Let's redesign it. Let's look at Final Five voting and how that changes our system. So real quickly, how does Final Five voting work? I'm going to run through an election example with you all. These are election results that we really did when we were in person at the Greater Milwaukee Committee in spring of 2019. So I think you will find these results somewhat interesting if you are a Wisconsin sports fan. So in a primary election, a Final Five voting election is simply a single ballot primary, meaning instead of having to go in and choose whether you're going to vote in the Republican column or the Democratic column, you pick your favorite candidate regardless of their party affiliation. Pick one. And the top 5 candidates from that primary, from that single ballot primary, advance to the general election. And that sets up this competition of ideas, of differentiation between candidates in the general election that gives voters real choice and real power with their vote in that general election. So you come in for that general election, and those top 5 candidates in that particular district are going to be on your ballot. And you have the opportunity in this race to say, I liked the Packers in the primary, I'm going to like the Packers in the general election, and that's it. I'm going to cast my vote just like I do today. But you also have the opportunity to say, well, if I can't have the Packers, who are my favorite, I guess I like the Bucks. The Brewers are fine. I don't really like the Forward, and I definitely don't like the Admirals. I can tell you I can rank as many or as few candidates as I choose on that ballot of the top 5 vote getters from the primary. And what that sets up is this opportunity to make sure that the candidate who wins actually has majority support. Because as you can see in this particular election, in the race that we had set up, if it were our current electoral system, the Bucks would win. The Bucks would win because we counted first place votes with 30% of the vote, meaning 70% of the electorate preferred a different candidate. And that's rather crazy. That's bizarre design. So we set up this series of runoffs that happen instantaneously because of that ranked choice ballot that you saw on the last slide. And it means that in this particular election, we dropped the Forward. They came in last, they're out of the race. Anyone who voted for the Forward has the opportunity to have that second place vote count. Their votes are reallocated, and that process of runoffs continues until a candidate goes over that threshold of getting majority support. And what that allows is it makes it so that whoever wins has the broadest support from the electorate as a whole. And it makes it so that those real choices, that real competition and accountability that provides good choice to the customer, to us, the voters in that general election, actually represents their entire district. So it changes that initial Venn diagram to say, now, as an elected official, if I'm in Congress and I'm working on behalf of my constituents, it's aligned. Doing things that my constituents want me to do is likely to help me get reelected. That's the sort of incentives we want to put in place, I would argue, I think we all agree, for our elected officials when they're governing. So that's Final Five voting in a nutshell. What we're doing here in Wisconsin is we're working to get legislation passed to advance Final Five voting. So we've got this fabulous group of leaders at Democracy Found who have introduced legislation in our state capitol, over 22 co-sponsors, both Republicans and Democrats, to advance Final Five voting for federal elections in our state. The Wisconsin State Journal, the La Crosse Tribune have editorialized in support of this effort. You'll see on the upper right-hand side of the screen are two lead authors for a long time have been State Senator Dale Koyenga, a Republican from Brookfield, and Representative Daniel Reamer, a Democrat from Milwaukee. Fabulous group of leaders in our state who are supporting this effort. We'll get into this a little bit more with some of the subsequent speakers. But suffice to say, in a state where, and I can take the screen share down, you don't need to see anything else here. In a state where we have to pass legislation, it's a slower campaign. There's no election day vote on this, which is both a challenge and an opportunity for us. It puts us in a place where we can build the campaign, build this coalition of support that means something to our state legislature and to our governor to get this passed. So we don't expect this bill to pass this session. It was introduced, we had a great strong showing, fabulous media around it, a real chance for awareness building. We'll have another chance for awareness building and building that support in the state legislature when we have a hearing later this year, likely in the fall or the winter. And then we will work to continue building that support through the next electoral cycle and reintroduce the bill with the goal of passage in the 2023 session in the Wisconsin State Legislature. So I look forward to answering any questions that you have later in this conversation. And I really look forward to working with you all to advance this support for Final Five voting in our state, because the idea is new. People don't know that there's a solution out there that can solve these frustrations that we all have, regardless of which side of the aisle we traditionally fall on. So it's incumbent on us to talk about this and talk about it in spheres where we don't often talk about politics, with the person that you don't agree with on every single other piece of policy. You now have something that you can talk to them about and feel really empowered going into that conversation that this is structural. It's not going to change a blue district red or a red district blue. It's just going to change the incentives for those elected officials when they're governing to do the job that we should expect them to do as our state, elected officials to Congress. So that's our federalist system. States have the ability to change these election laws. It doesn't take a constitutional amendment. It doesn't even take amending our state constitution. It takes state legislation. So that's my overview of Final Five voting for you all. I'm really excited to pass the baton to my friend John Pudner, who's going to tell you a little bit more about where we're at for support for Final Five voting and advancing the cause in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so great to follow Sarah because her explanation is so thorough. I feel like by the end of her talk, everyone understands it, which is difficult with a new voting system. So thank you. I'd just like to start with one question on this. You know, are most people happy the day after the election with who has been elected to represent them? Didn't say, do they feel like the perfect candidate was picked or their first pick in the whole world, or just are they happy? And, you know, that question may almost sound absurd when I ask it now, but when I worked Bush 2000, Wisconsin was one of my states. And, you know, for most of that election, over half the people had a favorable view of Gore and Bush. They liked both of them, believe it or not. I know this sounds like ancient history. And, you know, I'm not bitter about the ballot boxes that were left unmanned at Mellon campus at Marquette. If that happened to switch the vote, and there's no bitterness left. But, you know, the thing got nasty, you know, and the recount and everything else. But isn't that absurd to think that 20 years ago, we were like, yeah, I like them both. Hope mine wins, but I like the other candidate too. Two good candidates have been put in front of us. You know, it just seems like eons ago. So, I think there are two ways that doesn't happen, that you just aren't happy, and they aren't inevitable, but they're the two things that happen now. Obviously, one is the lesser of two evils. I can't believe these are the two people I'm choosing between. You know, I mean, how many times have any of us heard that? There's almost the reverse side. I can't stand either of these candidates. So, you know, in that case, with only two viable candidates, you're going to be sad the day after. You may be a little happier the one you really hate didn't win, but, you know, you're not going to be happy. Okay, so that's one option. But the second one, which Sarah alluded to with the sports analogy, is this 35% are happy and 65% think this is a terrible candidate. So it's not even a candidate who won, at least lesser of two evils. You can say, well, I guess 51% got the one they thought was the lesser of two evils. You can have 65% thinking the worst of all evils was elected, and yet they win with a 35%. And I can tell you from running campaigns for a couple of decades, the incentive on the people running the campaigns, not just the candidates, is to shred the opponent, to not make them viable. I mean, that's what a plurality system does. I have to make my opponent unacceptable. I was talking to someone who's just involved in winning a US Senate race this year, and it was none of our policies worked, none of our arguments worked. Luckily, we got the dirt on the other side to beat them. You know, it's that simple. So think of that incentive structure, not even the candidate themselves, but the people putting together the ads and the direct mail and the social media that everyone has to sit to. All that incentive is, it's a net sum zero game. There's some candidate I've got to knock below whatever my percentage is, 35 or whatever. So there are two parts of Final Five, and I'll take them out of order. The second part is this instant runoff, which Sara laid out, which is, you know, I can pick a backup choice. You know, the process is going to run. And what's really interesting is this was the process in state nominating conventions for years. You know, the primaries, you know, obviously became more popular recently. So not too long ago, I came in to do a convention in Wisconsin for Speaker Fitz. Some of you may hate him, some, I don't know, some may love him, but I like Fitz. But anyway, so we got in the race very late. And, you know, we were obviously up against a couple of icons in Wisconsin, Tommy Thompson and Newman, you know, who'd been such a congressional, well-known leader, again, like him or not. And I started that convention. There were four candidates. Eric Uppy ran to. I said, well, we're getting it late. Everyone's committed. I said, everyone's committed to first choice. No one's committed to second choice. We're going to every GOP county, me and the whole team. And you are going to be told, I've already committed. Tommy Thompson's been my best friend for 30 years or whatever. Newman's been my best friend. And you say, great, I would not want to break that friendship. I just want your commitment to be that Fitz is your second choice. And I told them, as long as we get through that first ballot, we win. Like, it's over. And we nudged out Hubby. I want to say it was like 19% to 16%, but we were most people's second choice. We were really almost everyone's second choice. And so by the third ballot, you know, we had taken 54%, and, you know, Newman had started at 44% and finished at 46%. So ironically, kind of this old, you know, dinosaur of nominating people, the state convention, it showed how this is done. And that wasn't quite instant. There was a little conversation at a convention, you know, for a half hour between ballots, but the basic idea was there. I actually walked away after the first ballot, and Fitz said to me, hey, well, we survived that. What do you think? And I said, the race is over. You know, we've won. I mean, couldn't believe, I honestly said, the race is over. I don't even need to look at the numbers for the second and third ballot. We know where everyone is. So think about if your whole incentive in a campaign now is to do that. I'd rather finish fourth than fifth, or, you know, eighth, I'm out of the picture or whatever, but I got to be everyone's second choice. I want to do things that make me a better representative of people. And so even just the instant runoff part of this, I think, does a lot of good. Now, the question then becomes, okay, how many choices do I have again? Because if it's only the top two who win, which is a system we take back, you have liked, I think that's an improvement. But can you go broader to get this beyond two-party nominees? Back to that lesser of two evils. And I do want to say something here. Obviously, we're thinking, okay, do you just want the Republican, the Democrat on the ballot? Does it really do any good to have it if we can't go broader? And I do want to say this is not an anti-party statement. And I try to be careful with independents on this, because if you ask people, do you like the Republican Party? Do you like the Democratic Party? Do you like neither party? Only 11 or 12% say I don't like either party. So it's not that most people hate both parties. Some do. More say they're independent. It's just a matter of different choices, different shades of, you know, do you have to go through that primary process to be on the fringe? Either one. I mean, Antifa or January 6th. I mean, pick the one you don't like. You know, is that going to control the 40% of the 40% of the spectrum that votes in primary? Sara pointed out less than 10% of voters often, but and so that's where this first part, which I had to wrestle with a little further, the open primary, starting with the open primary, started to make sense. I just think we need that. I like the idea of 5 choices in the end. We would take top 2 as, you know, as an advancement over the current system. But to give those choices, to really see it play out, I think 5 is a good number. It gives you choices. It does let someone who didn't get a nomination obviously in. I'm all for the party still having a convention and picking one of the candidates on the big ballot, not one of the final five, but one of them. Yeah, you can have, and that party's going to carry a lot of sway. The party can back their candidate. But I think that first part in the open primary is important to get you enough choices. And the much shorter point I want to make is the question always comes up with voting innovation is this a plot by the other side to make sure the other side wins? Is this a Democratic plot or Republican plot or whatever the issue is? And we kind of had a breakthrough with Republican messaging. There had been some concern because ranked choice voting had been done mainly in Democratic areas in the past. We just got passage of a good bill in Georgia and Utah recently, so it's changing. But a neat thing happened Saturday for us, talking to Republican leaders. I sent an email out on it, but there was an open primary in Texas, and the two Republicans finished first and second. Now, they're the only ones in the race. Now, ideal world, I'd like to see more than two choices, but it was a great case example for every Republican who said, wait, they do this in California, and you end up with two Democrats in the top two when you have an open primary. Back to just the first one, I say, well, that's because that district was 75% Democrat, and at least you're getting the time of day from one of the two Democrats to try to get your vote in the general. But it's just nice to have a case study like that. And this was a Trump 51-48 district. So, I mean, it wasn't a district Trump had just won big. Now, I will say the votes in this open primary, 64% picked a Republican candidate. So the turnout Saturday was high. But we do need that. And that's more for me talking to Republican leaders. But because you have Republican leadership in the state there, as long as that's the case, you need to win them over to say, no, this isn't some plot. This might result in Republicans at the top. It certainly is going to give you Republican options on election day too. So I think the open primary is actually one that's going to help Republicans and Democrats actually get more electable candidates in the end, as opposed to can we both get so far off to the right and left that our candidate's less electable than theirs. So I think the whole solution works, and really just thank everyone for being on and moving this forward.
Oh, I think we got John back, huh? Okay, great. John, thank you very much. And we will go right to Adam here.
Thank you, John. It's great to have these wonderful national and state leaders all coming together. This is a beautifully organized event. So I thank the leadership on the ground in Wisconsin for this. It's an honor for our team at Rank the Vote to be here. You guys are very well equipped to advance a very innovative reform. Let me just ask you guys, real gut check here. Give me 2 thumbs up if you're excited about final 5 voting, instant runoff voting, the ranked ballot, and you want to advance it in Wisconsin and you're ready to go. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about how to do it, how to get it done. That's the key question. There's been a lot of innovations in our system over the years, but it takes time. And I guess let me quiz you again on the second question. Give me 2 thumbs up if you're ready to rush into the State House and shake it up and let everybody know that you want final 5 voting or ranked choice or instant runoff. Good, you're not falling for it. Well, one Jarvis did, David did. It's calling you out, guys. It's a trick question, don't do it. So what I'm here to talk about is to actually think strategy first. And there's a couple of ways that we can do this. That one way that goes really poorly and one way that can go really, really well. And it all hinges on how much you step back and think about what are the tools, the equipment, the numbers, the volume, the scale that we need in order to be successful in the end. I use the word capacity. And I'm going to give you a quick example using some visuals of how this could play out. And in our method that we teach at Rank the Vote, we warn folks of like, okay, this is what activists do wrong. You get 20, 30, 50 people in a room like this. There's over 60, which is fantastic. Everybody gets excited. You do some public education events with very low turnout. You kind of gather little tiny nodes of people together. And you say, this is our campaign. You make a few decisions. Let's pick the language of our bill. Let's identify a few of the usual suspect legislators who support lots of innovative things, but there's only a few of them, and they're kind of on the margins in the State House. But we think, hey, We've got legislators, great. We make a great flyer, a great one-sheet explainer. We have a little list, less than 1,000 people. We've got some kind of mathy folks, third-party folks, independents, and then we go and lobby the State House. And so this is kind of what that campaign looks like. It's a very weak campaign. I go so far as to use the cruel, pejorative pseudo campaign. And we're kind of going through the motions, but we don't have the capacity to make a difference. And in the end, no one cares. So what we instead want to do is step back and think, what do we need to do first to form a strong foundation before we flip that switch and go into battle? And when I say go into battle, I mean go into the enactment arena, which is move legislation forward. And in this way, we've kind of broken it down into within our capacity growth area, and the gold here, build a strong list. People, money, raise grassroots dollars from in the state, and endorsements. Give talks, give expert talks to grass tops and gather endorsements. Then assess viability. Work with folks who know how to win campaigns. Work with folks who've passed legislation in Wisconsin before. Work with national orgs that have passed similar legislation around the country. And then form a strong coalition of respected mainstream organizations. Cover your bases. Legislators are going to push back and say, I'm not getting calls in my district. So you need to have the boots on the ground in as many legislative districts as you can and make those calls happen. It can't be 50 or 100 people. It's got to be thousands of people. And then you hire pros who know how to get it done and help provide key expert leadership. And in this way, when you combine those components, a huge list of tens of thousands of folks, thousands of calls to the State House, experienced campaign operatives to guide the strategy, dollars in the bank to pay for that, coalition of these mainstream orgs, huge lists of VIPs, business, labor, academic and faith leaders, VIPs endorsing it, and on your advisory board. Then when you go and lobby, everyone cares. People see it, they take notice, it becomes a very important mainstream issue. So a lot of what we're doing, what I like to say, we're bringing ranked choice voting out of the nerd stream and into the mainstream. And we're going to do the same with final five voting and instant runoff. So this is kind of our strategy. Rank the Vote was born out of the story of Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, we started on the heels of the amazing enactment of instant runoff voting statewide in Maine. We formed a meeting just like this, about 50 some people came out. And then we brought that group and we created a strong organizational structure and then worked very diligently over time and built our list to 60,000 people, raised millions of dollars, all starting as just volunteers, and then gathered a very long list of supporters. We had 30 speakers trained up, giving talks all over the state, bringing in those endorsements. And we used a lot of delegation. We used what I call the pina colada principle. And what's the pina colada principle? It's the idea that a good leader of a team or an organization, does some work and brings some people to help them. So it's not just 3 to 5 mules trudging up the mountain alone. But a great leader sits back and sips on a pina colada because they've delegated all of their tasks and projects to their members. Now it's a little tongue in cheek, but the concept there is really important. As you guys build and grow together, you want to really think about that idea of delegation and working in the form of teams, and then deferring specific niche expert things to the pros that are kind of already on the ground doing that, and focus a lot on that grassroots engagement. That's the big missing piece that we want to build, is that grassroots engagement and building a huge list all across Wisconsin, not just in the usual areas, but also out in more rural areas to do that. So that's kind of some of the tactics that we want to provide here. We also have our ranked choice voting playbook that Monica or Celia will paste in the chat if y'all haven't seen that. Many of you have already read that. So take a look at that as well. And just kind of a couple notes. The ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting, final five voting has been advanced both in the ballot measure format and the bill format. We all know here in Wisconsin, it's going to be a bill, but the principles are the same. You need that capacity first so that you're respected and you're listened to and you really mainstream the issue and give it the credibility it deserves. So those are all my comments, and I guess we'll move to the next portion.
Yeah, hey, great. Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate you sharing from your experience here. And thanks so much to Sarah and John for just kicking off everything and explaining Final Five voting to us. Look, at this time, folks, we want to offer up a time for Q&A. So we won't be able to take every question, but we will definitely want to take a few. There were some questions that came in offline. I'm going to start with one of them first, just to kick things off. But if you want to ask a question, just please raise your hand, and we'll have members of the leadership team looking out for people who have questions and letting me know via chat here. Okay, so Sarah, our first question is this. Can the current Final Five voting bill be amended to include all Wisconsin state elections and not just the congressional races?
Yeah, thanks for the question, because it really dives into the how this happens at the state level. And I just alluded to this. So the details are, we do this through state statute in Wisconsin. We change our state statutes to change the way our elections are run. So we have the ability, hypothetically, to do that for any and all elections in the state of Wisconsin. Our job is, as Adam mentioned earlier, strategy is choosing what not to do. So our job is to focus on what is going to be most powerful and can be accomplished, as Rich mentioned earlier. So our bill is very specific. It's specific to federal elections, focusing on US Senate and US House. And the reason for that is part pragmatic, part political, and part powerful, because Congress is dysfunctional. Everybody agrees, right? Their approval rating never goes above 20%. Regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, how you feel about government in Wisconsin, about our state legislature in Wisconsin, most people can agree that Congress needs to change, that they need to take on their role as the Article I branch again. There are lots of reasons for this, right? And so focusing there is incredibly powerful. It also means that we're changing elections by having the state legislature change the rules, not for their own personal elections, but for elections for Congress. So that's a bit of the pragmatic political piece of this. And other states have gone the route, so I'll be transparent about this, have gone the route of starting with municipal elections. And we chose not to do that for a handful of reasons. One of them being, you still have to change state statute to change the way municipal elections are run in Wisconsin. So you have that barrier of passing state legislation. So it was our decision strategically to focus on something that would be most powerful and bring the support that would really be needed to advance the movement in Wisconsin. And that is focusing on Congress and on those federal elections. Because one more piece on the municipal, just in case people are interested in that in particular, municipal elections, as we all already know as Wisconsinites, are nonpartisan elections. Now, the degree to which they're really nonpartisan these days, we could quibble with, but they are, there's no party primary when it comes to a nonpartisan municipal spring race in our state. So we don't have that problem that I talked about the party primary influencing in the same way. So Final Five voting is simply not as powerful at a municipal level as it is at a federal level. So that was the strategic decision as to why we're focusing on US Senate and US House races in Wisconsin. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this electoral system. I think it could be powerful for all sorts of elections, and let's bite off what we can chew and then see, where it goes from there. But at this point, we want to focus on biting off what we can chew, which we've decided is federal elections in Wisconsin.
Fantastic answer, Sarah. Thank you very much. We had a question in the chat from Nicholas. I see Lena tried to address that, but would love to get John's take. John, of course, is big into transparency. So John, any advice for us from your perspective if, let's say, a corporate donor wanted to give to our growing grassroots movement here? Any advice on how we would make sure that would be managed responsibly and with accountability?
Well, we're concerned by, obviously the amount of giving that's not transparent, et cetera, overall. However, I've said I think you've got to play by the current rules while you try to change them. And I'm not asking everyone to agree with me on that. But I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, there was a great congressman in Florida, Republican, who was all with us on money and politics. And to make a point of how committed he was, he said he wasn't going to ask anyone for money in his election. Well, he of course got destroyed and lost. And like, how did that advance the cause? I mean, to some degree, I would say go with the current rules, to try to win. Even if another issue, another call you're doing is on, hey, I'd really like to, get corporate money out or do this or that, but you just can't handcuff yourself. So I think if you've got a corporate donor with, the right vision, the right views, I would welcome them in at this point. I just think it's the only place, again, to be pragmatic and win.
Wonderful. Thank you, John, for your sage advice. Okay, I don't see any hands up right now. So we'll take, oh, there is a question.
I see a question in the chat that I'm happy to take, Rich, which is around this perception of Final Five potentially making it easier to cheat, or this perception of how would this fit with the conversation around election integrity. I'll kind of take the question bigger with that. I think it's a really important point and something for us. I was just talking to someone about this, and John, I'm sure you've got comments. You can weigh in on this as well. It's powerful for votes to matter, is how I would kind of frame my response to that, which is to say, in our election system right now, it's unfortunately quite pragmatic and reasonable for people to feel like their votes don't count and their votes don't matter. Because oftentimes after that primary election, or if you're not of the party that's going to win that district in the primary election, your vote doesn't really matter, right? It's not influencing the outcome in a powerful way. So there's something to say for having a system where votes do matter, where all votes do matter. And even if you are in the bluest of districts and you're a Republican, or you're in the reddest of districts and you're a Democrat, you want to make sure that your voice is actually heard and that you are a constituent who matters to your representative. So this system is really empowering to voters in that way. And I think it's really incumbent on all of us to make that point, especially as we do have so much attention on elections, election administration, how elections are run, and to say that all of the work that can be done to improve the integrity and processes of our elections would apply regardless of what the electoral system is. So all of this work that's being done, on how elections are administered will be relevant to whatever electoral system is used, whether it be our current plurality system or a Final Five voting system.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sara. All right, we had another question that had come in before. I'm going to direct this one to Adam. It was about just, is this type of voting system confusing from all the different things you've seen? Will voters get confused? If so, how do we address that to make sure that they're not disenfranchised?
Well, Final Five voting polls very well, actually. It tends to poll better than instant runoff ranked choice voting alone. That should be very heartening to this group. So you guys have a bit of an edge that way when you're out in the field talking to regular voters. The reason is there is a lot of disaffection with the partisan system, and it is seen as a way to make help voters feel more connected to the process as a whole, regardless of party involvement or party label. So for them to see, I get to choose among both Dems, Republicans, Independents, other parties, et cetera, on the ballot, I feel more empowered. I like that. So that part is that's a very clear through line of understanding for that. In terms of the ranked ballot, although that's not so familiar by the majority of the population in the US today, it's very easily explained, and practitioners like ourselves, like FairVote and others in the field, have worked on it for years to get the messaging very, very simple. And one great way to do that is backup choices. So ranked choice voting is just, it gives you an option of more power, more freedom, and more expression on your ballot. You can pick one, but if you want a backup choice, if your favorite can't win, you can rank 2, 3, 4. That's pretty darn simple. When you explain that and show people the ballot, they immediately get it. And so we actually tested messaging kind of like that in Massachusetts. We're able to sign up thousands and thousands and thousands of people at events just with our clipboards And we hope that you guys, as things open up post-pandemic, you guys are doing the same thing.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that answer, Adam. I appreciate hearing from your experience. Okay, guys, we got more questions than we have time to get to. So we will try to answer some of these offline. But at this point, let's first of all give another virtual round of applause to our speakers for your reactions. Thank you so much for your time. That will conclude part 1 of our meeting tonight.